He called me weak. He said I'd never survive without him. 3 years later, I owned the room he controlled, and he couldn't even look me in the eye. The first time he called me weak, it wasn't loud. It wasn't even angry. It was worse. It was calm, careless, like it was a fact. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of my office, each drop sliding down like it was trying to escape the storm outside. The city lights blurred behind the water, turning into a mix of gold and white streaks that looked almost unreal. I stood there motionless, watching, thinking, remembering. 3 years ago, I wasn't standing in a corner office overlooking the entire skyline. I wasn't wearing a tailored black suit that fit like armor. I wasn't the woman people whispered about in boardrooms. Back then, I was just his wife. Emma, you don't understand how the real world works. His voice echoed in my mind like it always did. Sharp, dismissive, final. I could still see that night so clearly. The kitchen smelled like burned garlic and overcooked pasta because I had been too distracted to turn the stove off in time. The yellow light above us flickered slightly, adding to the tension that already filled the room. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like I was some kind of disappointment he had to tolerate. I do understand, I had said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. No, he interrupted, almost laughing. You think you do, but you don't. You're soft, Emma. You always have been. Soft. That word again. It followed me everywhere back then. At family dinners, at his office parties, even in my own home. I wasn't always like that. People assume weakness is something you're born with. It's not. It's something that gets built, slowly, piece by piece, by the people you trust the most. When I met Daniel, he wasn't like that. Or maybe, I just didn't see it. He was confident, charming, the kind of man who could walk into a room and own it without even trying. People admired him, respected him. And me. I admired him too. That was my first mistake. Say something, he said that night, his voice colder now. I turned off the stove, my hands trembling slightly as I faced him. What do you want me to say? The truth, he replied instantly. I swallowed. The truth is, I'm trying. He sighed, long, dramatic, like I had just proven his point. That's exactly the problem. That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else. Trying wasn't enough. Not for him. Not for the life he wanted. Not for the image he needed. The rain outside got heavier, pulling me back into the present. I blinked slowly and turned away from the window. My office was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Steady, controlled, predictable. Unlike my past, a soft knock broke the silence. Come in, I said, my voice calm, composed, unrecognizable from the woman I used to be. The door opened, and Sarah stepped in, holding a file against her chest. Everything's ready for tomorrow's meeting, she said. The board is expecting you at 9 a.m. sharp. I nodded. Good. Make sure the final reports are sent out tonight. She hesitated for a second. There's one more thing. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Yes. She took a small breath. Daniel Carter confirmed his attendance. For a moment, just one brief moment, everything inside me went still. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of rebuilding myself from nothing. And now, he was walking back into my world. I see, I said simply. No reaction. No emotion. At least not on the outside. Do you want me to? No. I cut her off gently. It's fine. She studied me for a second, like she was trying to read something beneath the surface. But there was nothing to read anymore. That version of me was gone. All right, she said finally, nodding before leaving the room. The door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. I walked back to the window, my reflection staring back at me. Sharp, controlled, untouchable. Everything he once said I could never be. You're too weak for this world. His voice again. Always his voice. I let out a quiet breath, my fingers tightening slightly against the glass. You were wrong, I whispered. Because he didn't see the nights I stayed awake, learning everything he said I couldn't understand. He didn't see the rejection emails, the failed interviews, the moments I almost gave up. He didn't see the version of me that cried alone in tiny apartments, questioning if he was right. But he would. Soon. The next morning came faster than I expected. The sky was clear now, the storm completely gone, leaving behind a crisp, sharp brightness that filled the city with energy. The building buzzed with quiet tension. Big meeting. Big decisions. Big consequences. I walked through the hallway, heels clicking against the polished marble floor, each step steady, intentional. People greeted me as I passed. Respectfully. Carefully. Some even nervously. Funny. Once upon a time, I couldn't even speak in a room full of people without second-guessing every word. The boardroom door stood ahead of me, tall, dark, imposing. For a second, my hand paused on the handle. Not because I was scared, but because I knew, the moment I stepped inside, everything would change. I pushed the door open. The room was already filled. Executives, investors, board members, and at the far end of the table, him, Daniel. He looked exactly the same. Confident posture, perfect suit, that same controlled expression. But his eyes, they changed the moment they landed on me. Shock, confusion, disbelief, like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Emma, he said my name slowly, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked in without hesitation, taking my seat at the head of the table. Not beside him, not behind him, above him. Good morning, I said, my voice steady, clear, commanding. The room fell silent instantly. And Daniel, he just stared at me, because in that moment, he realized something. The woman he once called weak was now the one holding his future in her hands. And this time, I wasn't trying anymore. I was winning. The room didn't just fall silent. It froze, like time itself had stopped just to witness the moment Daniel Carter lost control. His eyes stayed locked on me, not blinking, not moving, just staring, like he was trying to find the woman he used to know somewhere beneath the version sitting in front of him. But she wasn't there anymore. Shall we begin? I said calmly, opening the file in front of me. My voice sliced through the silence like a blade, sharp, precise, leaving no room for hesitation. One by one, the board members shifted in their seats, quickly pulling themselves back into professional mode. But Daniel, he was still stuck. You're leading this meeting, he finally asked, his tone uncertain for the first time since I had ever known him. There it was, the crack. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze without flinching. Yes, I said simply. Is there a problem? A few people around the table exchanged quick glances. They could feel it. The tension, the history, the storm that hadn't even started yet. Daniel straightened slightly, regaining some of his composure. No, he said, clearing his throat. Just unexpected. Unexpected. I almost smiled. Life tends to be, I replied, before turning my attention to the screen behind me. Let's get started. The presentation began. Numbers, strategies, growth projections, every detail perfectly aligned, every word deliberate, every pause controlled. But I could feel it. His eyes on me. Constant. Unsettled. And for the first time, he was the one trying to catch up. You're proposing a full acquisition? One of the board members asked, adjusting his glasses. Yes, I nodded. It's the only logical move. That's a high-risk decision. Only if you don't understand the long-term impact, I responded smoothly. Daniel leaned forward slightly, finally stepping in. Or if you're overestimating your position. There it was. The old tone. The subtle challenge. The quiet attempt to undermine me. I turned my head slowly, meeting his gaze again. This time, there was no softness left in mine. Would you like to elaborate? I asked. A faint smirk touched his lips. He thought he had found his ground again. I think, he said, his voice steady now, that aggressive decisions like this often come from inexperience rather than strategy. The room went still again. A direct hit. Or at least, that's what he thought. I leaned back slightly in my chair, completely unfazed. Inexperience, I repeated calmly. Yes, he said, more confidently now. You're making a move that could collapse under pressure. For a second, I let the silence stretch, let him sit in his confidence, let the room lean toward his side. Then, I spoke. Interesting. I picked up a file and slid it across the table toward him. Then I'm sure you've reviewed the full report before forming that opinion. His hand paused for just a fraction of a second before he picked it up. A small moment. But I noticed. I always notice now. He flipped it open. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. Once. Twice. Then. They slowed down. And just like that, I saw it. The shift. The confidence. Gone. "What is this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "That," I said, folding my hands calmly, "is the part you didn't expect." The board members leaned in, curious. "What does it show?" one of them asked. I didn't break eye contact with Daniel. "It shows," I said slowly, "that the company you're representing," I paused, just for a second, "isn't as stable as you've led everyone to believe." A ripple moved across the room. "That's not true," Daniel said quickly, but there was something different now. Not confidence. Not control. Something else. Pressure. "Isn't it?" I tilted my head slightly. "Then you won't mind explaining the inconsistencies in your last 3 financial quarters." Silence. Real silence this time. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're misinterpreting the data." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm reading it correctly." The air felt heavier now. Thicker. Like it was pressing down on everyone in the room. "You're making assumptions," he said, trying to push back. "And you're avoiding the truth," I countered instantly. Another pause. Another shift. This wasn't a discussion anymore. It was a confrontation. And he was losing. I stood up slowly, walking toward the screen behind me. "Let me make this simpler for everyone," I said. The slide changed. Charts appeared, highlighted numbers, clear patterns, impossible to ignore. "These," I pointed, "are the real figures." Murmurs started spreading across the room. Low. Uneasy. Daniel stood up suddenly. "This is completely out of context." I turned to face him. "No," I said quietly. "This is exactly the context you were hoping no one would see." Their eyes moved between us, back and forth, like they were watching something unravel in real time. "You think this gives you power?" he said, his voice lower now, sharper. I stepped closer, not intimidated, not hesitant. "I don't think," I said softly. "I know." That hit harder than anything else, because he could see it, feel it. The balance had shifted, and there was nothing he could do about it. The chairman finally spoke. "We'll need to review this carefully." "Yes," I nodded. "You should." Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked unsettled, and that's when I leaned in just slightly, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "You called me weak once." He froze. I held his gaze. "That was your biggest mistake." I straightened and stepped back, my expression returning to calm professionalism. "Meeting adjourned," I said. Chairs moved. Voices rose. The room came back to life. But Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, trying to understand how the woman he once broke so easily had become the one breaking him without even raising her voice. And this was only the beginning. Because what he still didn't know was that I hadn't just come to win a meeting. I came to finish what he started. The hallway outside the boardroom was loud. Voices, footsteps, whispered conversations. But none of it reached me. Because behind me, I could hear his footsteps. Fast, heavy, determined. "Emma!" I didn't stop. "Emma, stop!" This time, his voice was sharper. Closer. Still. I kept walking. My heels echoed against the marble floor, steady, controlled, like nothing had changed. Like he didn't matter anymore. And maybe that's what pushed him. His hand grabbed my wrist. The moment froze. 3 years ago, that same grip would have made my heart race, would have made me panic, would have made me apologize, even if I did nothing wrong. But now, I slowly looked down at his hand, then back up at him. "Let go," I said quietly. Something in my tone made him hesitate, just for a second. But he didn't release me. "Not until you explain what that was," he said. His jaw was tight, eyes intense, searching, demanding. I gently pulled my hand free. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just effortlessly. "That," I said, adjusting my sleeve, "was business." He let out a dry laugh. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "This act," he snapped. "Like none of this is personal." I tilted my head slightly. "Is it?" That hit him. I saw it. His expression flickered, confusion mixing with something deeper. Something almost hurt. "You're going after my company," he said. "You think that's not personal?" I stepped a little closer, not enough to invade his space, but enough to make him feel it. "You think this is about you?" I asked softly. Silence. That silence. It cracked something inside him. "Then what is it about?" he demanded. For a moment, I just looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I once loved, at the man who slowly convinced me I was nothing, at the man who never even realized what he destroyed. "You really don't know, do you?" I said. His brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I exhaled slowly, and for the first time since he walked back into my life, I let the past come through. Not weakness, not pain. Truth. 3 years ago, I began, my voice calm but heavier now. The night before I left, his expression changed. Slightly. "You remember that night?" I asked. He frowned. "Of course I do. Do you?" I stepped closer. "Or do you just remember what you said?" He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. "You told me I wasn't enough," I continued. "You told me I was holding you back. You told me I'd never survive without you." Each word landed like a quiet. "But that's not the part you forgot," I said softly. Now, he was listening, really listening. "That night," I said, my voice lowering, "I tried to tell you something." A pause. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I tried to tell you I was pregnant." Silence. Not the kind of silence that fills a room. The kind that breaks it. "What?" His voice barely came out. I stood right there. I continued, my eyes never leaving his. "In that kitchen, while you were tearing me apart, and I kept waiting for a moment to say it." My chest tightened slightly, but I didn't stop. I thought maybe, just maybe, if you knew you'd stop. His face went pale. "But you didn't," I said. "You just kept going." I could see it now. The memories hitting him. Pieces falling into place. Things he never noticed before. "I didn't get the chance to tell you," I said quietly. His lips parted, but no words came out. I left the next morning. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on us. "What happened?" he finally asked. There it was. The question he should have asked 3 years ago. I held his gaze for a long moment. Then, I answered. "I lost it." The words were simple, but they carried everything. His entire body went still. "It was too much," I said, my voice steady but softer now. The stress, the pressure, the constant feeling that I wasn't enough. A tear almost formed, but it didn't fall. "I was alone," I continued, "and I believed every word you said about me." He took a step back, like the truth physically hit him. "I didn't know," he whispered. I let out a small, almost empty laugh. "No," I said. "You didn't." Another silence. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was guilt. Pure. Heavy. Unavoidable guilt. "I would've." "No." I cut him off instantly. My voice was sharper now. Stronger. "You wouldn't have." He flinched. "Because if you cared enough to listen," I said, "I wouldn't have been standing there alone in the first place." That one broke through everything. His eyes dropped for the first time. And just like that, the man who once made me feel small looked small himself. "I didn't come back for revenge," I said after a moment. He looked up again, confused. "I came back because I built something," I continued. "Something strong. Something real. Something you said I never could." I stepped back, creating distance again. "But when I saw your company," I added, "I realized something." "What?" he asked quietly. "You never changed." That hit deeper than anything else. "You're still building everything on control," I said. "On pressure. On fear." His silence confirmed it. "And now," I finished, "it's collapsing." He swallowed hard. "And I'm not here to save it." That was the moment. The moment he understood. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just revenge. This was consequence. 3 years late. I turned away. "Emma," he called again. But this time, I didn't stop. Because some stories don't need closure. They need endings. And his was just beginning. That night, the city didn't sleep. Neither did I. From my apartment window, the skyline looked different now. Not peaceful. Not beautiful. It looked aware. Like it knew something big had already started shifting beneath its surface. My phone kept vibrating. Messages, calls, emails, board members, investors, media requests, and one name kept appearing again and again. Daniel Carter. But I didn't answer. Not a single one. Because I knew. He wasn't calling as a businessman anymore. He was calling as someone drowning. The next morning came fast. Too fast. By 7:30 a.m., the first headline hit the financial news channels. Internal financial discrepancies found in Carter Holdings. By 8:15, major investors question leadership stability. By 9 o'clock, emergency board meeting called at Carter headquarters. And by 9:30, the empire started shaking. I sat in my office, calm, coffee untouched. The screen in front of me showed live updates, stock graphs dropping, news alerts flashing red, social media exploding. But I wasn't smiling. Not fully. Not yet. Because revenge is never loud in the beginning. It's quiet, precise, patient. And this was only phase 1. Ma'am. Sarah entered quickly, breathing slightly fast. It's happening faster than expected. I looked up. How fast? She hesitated. Daniel has lost 2 major investors in the last hour. I nodded slowly. Good. She paused. Good. I stood up, walking toward the window. Outside, the city moved like nothing was wrong. People still went to work, still drank coffee, still lived normal lives. But inside one building, everything was collapsing. He's requesting a meeting with you, Sarah said carefully. I didn't turn. No. She blinked. Ma'am. I took a slow sip of coffee, then placed the cup down. He doesn't get meetings, I said softly. He gets consequences. Silence. Even Sarah didn't speak after that, because she understood now. This wasn't a negotiation. This was judgment. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel Carter's world was falling apart. The Carter headquarters didn't feel like power anymore. It felt like panic. Phones ringing nonstop, executives arguing, glass doors opening and closing too fast, voices overlapping, fear spreading quietly like smoke. And in the middle of it all, he stood, still, silent, trying to hold together something that was already gone. Sir, the board wants an explanation. We've lost $200 million in valuation. Media is outside demanding statements. But Daniel wasn't listening properly. Because his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on her. Emma. Everything kept going back to her. That meeting. Her voice. Her eyes. The file. The truth. And the words he couldn't forget. I lost it. His hand tightened slowly around the edge of the table. Find her, he said suddenly. One of the executives looked up. Sir. Find Emma, he repeated, louder this time. I need to speak to her. A pause. Then someone finally said it. Carefully. Hesitantly. She's not taking meetings. Silence. Daniel looked up sharply. What do you mean she's not taking meetings? She's blocking all communication. That hit harder than anything else. Because for the first time, he understood something. He wasn't in control anymore. Not of the company. Not of the situation. Not of her. Outside the building, reporters gathered like a storm. Cameras flashing. Microphones raised. Questions shouted. Is Carter Holdings collapsing? Is it true there was internal fraud? Where is Daniel Carter? But none of it mattered. Because inside, the real collapse was happening quietly. That evening, Daniel finally got one message. From an unknown number. No subject. No greeting. Just one line. You built your empire on control. I built mine on truth. His breath stopped. He read it again. And again. But there was no signature. None needed. He already knew. Emma. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Carter didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, I stood again at my window, watching the same city, but feeling different. Not powerful. Not angry. Not satisfied. Just empty. Because revenge doesn't feel like victory. It feels like silence after a storm. My phone lit up again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. But I knew who it was. And I knew. This wasn't over yet. Because Daniel Carter wasn't the kind of man who accepted endings easily. And neither was I. The city felt quieter that morning. Not because noise was gone, but because something important had already ended. At least, that's what I thought. I stood in my office, staring at the skyline like I had done so many times before. But today felt different. Heavier. Final. The empire I built. The revenge I planned. The silence I forced. It had all led to this moment. My phone lay on the desk. Silent. For once. No messages. No calls. No chaos. Just peace. But peace has a strange way of feeling like danger when you've lived inside storms for too long. At exactly 11:00 a.m., the elevator in my building stopped on my floor. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The door opened. Slow. Controlled. And there he was. Daniel Carter. But not the man from the boardroom. Not the confident CEO. Not the one who used to look down on me. This version of him looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like something inside him had been stripped away. He stepped forward. The door closed behind him. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Just distance. Just history. Just everything we never said. Finally, he broke the silence. I lost everything. Simple sentence. Heavy truth. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who once made me feel small. Now looked smaller than I ever felt. I know, I said quietly. That hit him harder than expected. Because there was no surprise in my voice. Only acceptance. You planned all of this, he said. Not a question. A realization. I turned slightly toward the window. Yes. Another silence. Outside, the city moved on. It always does. Why? He asked finally. His voice wasn't angry now. It was broken. That question. I had waited years to hear. But now that it came, it didn't feel powerful. It felt hollow. I took a slow breath. And for the first time, I didn't speak like a CEO, or a strategist, or a woman in control. I spoke like someone who once lost everything. Because you didn't just underestimate me, I said softly. You erased me. His jaw tightened slightly. But he didn't interrupt. You made me believe I was weak, I continued. And when I finally started believing it, I paused. I lost the only thing I never told you about. Silence again. But this time, he already knew what I meant. I know, he whispered. I nodded slowly. That's the difference between us now. He took a step forward. Emma. I didn't know. If I had. I turned toward him sharply. No. Just one word. But it stopped everything. You don't get to rewrite it, I said. You don't get to turn it into ignorance. His eyes dropped. For the first time. No defense. No argument. Just regret. I deserved punishment, he said quietly. I studied him for a long moment. Then I said something unexpected. Even to myself. No. He looked up. Confused. You don't deserve punishment, I continued. You deserve to understand. I walked closer now. Not as a victim. Not as an enemy. But as someone who survived. Everything I did, I said, wasn't to destroy you. A pause. It was to rebuild me. The room felt still. Like even the air was listening. You were never my ending, I added. You were just my beginning. His eyes softened slightly. Something inside him breaking, or maybe healing. I loved you, he said finally. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in pain, not in anger. Just acceptance. I know, I replied. A long silence followed, the kind that doesn't need filling. Then I said the final truth. But love without respect is just damage in slow motion. That line stayed between us. Heavy. Final. Unmovable. He nodded slowly, like he finally understood something too late. I'm sorry, he whispered. This time. I believed him. But forgiveness is not always reconciliation. And healing is not always reunion. I walked back to my desk, picked up a file, signed one final document. What is that? He asked. I looked at him one last time. Calm. Complete. Closure, I said. Then I placed it inside a folder and sealed it. For both of us. He didn't stop me. Because now he knew. There was nothing left to fight. Only acceptance. Only consequences. Only time moving forward. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. Emma, he said softly. I didn't look up. But I listened. You were never weak, he said. A pause. Just unheard. The door closed behind him. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I had finally arrived, not as someone rebuilt by revenge, not as someone defined by pain, but as someone who no longer needed either. Outside, the city kept moving, as it always does, but inside me, everything had finally stopped, and in that silence, I found something I thought I lost forever: peace.